From Psalm 130, out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, so that you may be revered. I wait for the Lord, and my soul waits, and in his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than those who watch for the morning, more than those who watch for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is steadfast love, and with him is great power to redeem. It is he who will redeem Israel from all its iniquities.
There we go. Good morning. Second time's a charm. I want to welcome you to worship with us today. I am so excited that you are here with us at this service, especially when I'm competing with this beautiful set and adorable children coming up at 11 o'clock. I hope you all are planning to stick around, because I found out that unfortunately we will not be streaming the musical, so I hope that you stick around to get a chance to see it. In case we haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is Reinhardt-Swierk. That might be a change from the name that you're used to. I cut off my hair, dropped the I, and started using they, them pronouns. I am the Social Justice Coordinator and Director of Young Adult Ministry here at Manchester United Methodist Church. I also spend a good amount of time trying to do justice work in our larger Methodist Connection and Conference. I made a joke the past couple of weeks when I was talking at the youth group at their Sunday night sermons that I'm usually the person that gets called in when it's time to talk about something uncomfortable or messy. So just be warned, when you see me up here, you know that I am going to be the person that might just be pushing a little bit. So I am glad that you are here today to be here with me in one of my very few opportunities to get to preach. I'm so excited that we're doing this together. So we are currently in the season of Lent, which is my favorite season of the church year. The point of Lent is to prepare ourselves for Easter. A lot of us at Lent will give up something, or we take on new practices. The point of this is for us to take some time to assess where we are and how our relationship is with God, so that we can get to a good place before the joy of Easter. Reverend Andy has been moving us through this Lenten series called New Again, for finding meaning in uncertain times. And I think this series is fantastic because we are in an uncertain time. Our church is in an uncertain time as the Methodist denomination decides how we will move forward in relationship with one another. Our society is in an uncertain time with generational divides that seem to be getting larger and larger, and God knows our political situation in this country is very uncertain. So last week, Andy talked about how when we're looking at all of this uncertainty and all of this change, we have a tendency to feel afraid or anxious, right? And he challenged us last week to reframe our anxiety, to reconceive of our anxiety of what might change to be hope for the future. And I think that's an awesome message. I struggle with anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder, and even having a party puts me into a panic. And it took having a young adult event and Reverend Winter Hamilton coming up to me, noticing my nervousness, and responding, "What if you aren't nervous? What if you're just excited?" And that has been truly transformative for me. And I love that we can take our anxiety about the future of the church and turn it into excitement and hope. I loved his analogy of reframing the painting of our faith, by which we keep our messages and create new framing for new contexts. This is a wonderful analogy for the Lent season. However, not all emotions in relation to uncertainty can be reframed, restructured, or reorganized. Things like grief and mourning and intimate loss cannot be reframed. They just have to be experienced and lived through. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about and focus on the pain and death that's necessary for us to get to the redemption and the resurrection. Because, friends, in our society, we are too quick to push past the pain to try to get to the promise. Too often we see our wilderness as a journey we're walking through, pretending that we're comfortable, when we're actually sweating to death and lost in the desert. That's the feeling that this psalm was about this morning. When we look at this psalm, the psalmist is talking about some really serious pain. I cry out to you from the depths, O Lord, listen to my voice. My whole soul cries for the Lord. The psalmist is talking about a pain in that inky black darkness when we feel alone and lost and trapped. What's important to note here is this is not a psalmist who is crying out, God, come rescue me. The psalmist is not asking God to lift them out of the depths, but is rather asking that your ears pay attention to my mercy. The cry out for pain is not a cry for a response, but a cry for witness and companionship. Too many of us knows what these desperate cries feel like. Some of us have struggled with depression and mental illness and have experienced those days that are so black that you can't get yourself out of bed. Some of us have received diagnoses in our life that make us completely rethink who we are and how we relate to our bodies. It changes our life. Some of us have experienced extreme loss and have lost a parent or a child or a spouse or a friend. And we know that pain when we just sit and cry out, wishing for someone to listen. Or maybe we're lucky. Maybe you haven't yet been at that depth of dark pain, but I know each one of us has been out of work or out of money or out of hope or out of patience. We all know what it feels like to be down and out and empty. And as this psalmist reminds us, we are usually a little bit to blame for that ourselves, right? Lord, if you kept track of our sins, who would stand a chance? We all know that when we are in pain, we're usually hurting ourselves or others as well. Too often our pain is also related to our attention and our orientation. Now, we all know what this remorse and regret feels like. We've all participated in brokenness, and we are all seeking the loving, forgiving, healing presence of God. But that mourning and that crying out before God arrives with light to save the day is a vital part of our human experience. It's an experience that we can't ignore or move past quickly, but rather an experience that we should sit with and try to understand. This psalm has two moral calls in it. The psalmist describes their pain, but then lets us know what we are to do. We are to orient ourselves towards God and wait. We are to find reverence, and then we are to sit in it, just like the night watch waits for morning. Now, I work with young adults a lot, and sometimes it's hard to use Bible stories exactly as they're written, right? Because this story that's 2,000 years old uses examples that we don't really understand. I don't know about you all, but I'm a city folk. Who else in here is a city person? Right? I'm a city person. So I love living in Boston. I lived in Chicago. St. Louis is pretty much the smallest city I'm gonna do. So I'm not used to nights that are actually dark. Even when I lived in a rural community, pickup trucks and fast food signs were on all night, right? It's just the world we live in. The world we live in is very bright. And then I was just trying to think about how to talk about the night watch waiting for morning. I thought maybe a Game of Thrones reference, but I don't know if everyone's seen it. And then last night I went on a haunted neighborhood tour. And at the end of the tour, we were taken into a cellar in the Lemp Brewery. We were all brought in, we were told the scary thing that happened in the room, and then the lights were turned off in a basement with no windows where people had been murdered. It was terrifying, but in that moment, I thought of this scripture, because that's what the night watch at this time is about. It's not like we think of in medieval days or in Shakespeare, where there's someone guarding. The night watch is someone who is literally in charge of watching for it to become morning. This is someone who might be protecting wherever we're staying, but it's also someone who has become in charge of time. It is their job to watch the horizon to let us know when the light is coming. And that's what we are called to do in our moments of darkness. And we know this is what we're supposed to do because, friends, this is what Jesus himself did. Now, I'm preaching on the lectionary about 3 weeks in advance because we're on a sermon series, and sometimes you gotta budge around the dates, especially when you got a musical. So if you're doing a lectionary Bible study, I might be about a few weeks ahead of you. But in our lectionary, we're given 5 verses that all kind of interact with each other. So the lectionary gospel that goes along with this psalm is John 11. The story of John 11 is one of those stories that we all know so well as folks who are in church that we could probably recite it in our sleep and might just be missing the point a bit. So John 11 is the story of Lazarus, right? So let me set the scene for you here. Jesus knows these 2 women, Mary and Martha, right? Martha is precocious. She likes to get things out there. She likes to move fast and get things done. Mary, a little more emotional, a little more reflective, right? We know that story about them at the feet of Jesus. But what we don't hear in that first story is that Mary and Martha have a brother named Lazarus. And we know from John 11 that Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. I imagine their community to be something similar to what our young adults have been building together when we try to live life in companionship. So this community runs into a problem. Lazarus falls sick. Luckily, Mary and Martha have already met Jesus. They've already seen miracles, so they know what to do, right? Send word to Jesus. Let him know Lazarus is sick. He loves Lazarus. He's gonna come, and he's gonna fix this for us. So, word gets to Jesus. Your friend is sick. We desperately need you. And what does Jesus do? He waits for 2 days. He's anxious with his disciples, talking about, I need to go over there, but there are people on the way who might be a danger to me. So we wait. After 2 days, he tells his friends, it's time for us to go. We're gonna go wake up Lazarus. So then, Jesus heads out. If we hadn't finished the story, we expect Jesus to get there, to call Lazarus from his sickbed, to dance with him and to celebrate the miracle, but that's not what happens in this story. Because you see, by the time Jesus gets to Lazarus, Lazarus has been dead and in the ground for 4 days. Can we imagine what that must have felt like for Mary and Martha, who knew that Jesus was miraculous, who knew that Jesus had the power to save their brother, but still had to sit in that pain and in that mourning? When Jesus finally arrives, Martha is the first one. She runs out of the house to Jesus, much like I would if I was in the situation. And the first thing she says to him, where were you? If you had been here, my brother would be alive. Jesus doesn't really respond. He and Mary go into town, and we're told that there are folks gathered, practicing the ritualistic mourning of the time for Lazarus. Jesus notices that Mary is not there. emotional, contemplative Mary is handling her pain alone. So what does Jesus do? Jesus calls Mary out to him, out to the crowd, and he gets told off again. Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would still be alive. And actually, the crowd even says it. In this scripture, 3 times, Jesus is brought to task for not showing up when he should have to save the day. Everyone has been made to wait. And after these 3 times of being faced with the pain around him, we get my favorite, shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. After being present in the pain around him, Jesus experiences that call of pain in the darkness. Before resurrecting Lazarus, he experiences grief, reorients himself to God, and asks God to heal Lazarus. Now, we know how the story ends. Lazarus is raised from the dead, and this is meant to be an example to prepare us for Jesus' death and resurrection. But I think we are losing something if we too quickly move over the fact that Jesus wept, even though he knew Lazarus would live again. Let's think about that. The divine, the perfect, the unending, wept because of loss. Now, I don't know about you all, but I've been noticing so much pain in the world lately. We have a 24-hour news cycle that's making this year's super bug seem like it's the apocalypse coming to get us, right? We are noticing the pain in our church as we struggle through how to be a community together, as we struggle to figure out how to change. There is pain in our political system as our ideology has become more important than our values and our connection. A lot of us are mourning. When we think about the space we're in right now, a lot of us might be mourning the loss of our church. We might be mourning the loss of tradition and comfort of things being the way they've always been. But for others of us, we are sitting in the mourning of our church being a shoe that for too long has been too small to fit. We are mourning no matter where we are on the spectrum of politics or on our position of our church and denomination's future. Really, I think part of what's happening here is a larger shift. It's not just about our church, it's about our society, because we as a culture right now are mourning the loss of the idea of the objective individual. We're losing the concept that there is one way to be, or one way to live, or one experience of God. We are entering a time that is more diverse, more different, more creative. But that also is so scary and means we may be losing so much. So what do we do? What do we do when we have this pain? Well, it's our job to orient, listen, and wait for morning. There was a poem that I wanted to use today, but it was a little too edgy, I thought, for a title for a sermon. So it's my favorite poet. Their name is Andrea Gibson. They look like me. I took inspiration from their outfit for what to wear today. They do a lot of poetry about social justice and as well as depression. And in one of these poems, which is entitled Angels of the Get-Through, there is a line that I find so valuable, and it says, "Don't worry, darling. Everyone's survival looks a little bit like death sometimes." Right? And we know this. Those of us who have gone through large-scale transformations in our life know this to be true. You can talk to any addict who has gone through a 12-step program and see this moment happen, right? You can see this moment of step 1, accepting that I am powerless. Step 2, accepting that I need help. And step 3, turning it over to God. Now, the 12-step system is a nice shorthand for all of these different things, but ultimately, that is what this psalmist is telling us to do. You see, the 103rd Psalm is titled a pilgrim's song. And we know that the Jewish people did a lot of wandering and walking, right? Throughout the Bible, we have all of these different songs and stories that go with moving from one geographical location to another. But this is not that kind of pilgrimage. This is not a song for a pilgrimage from place to place, but it is a song for a pilgrimage that is theological, psychological, and emotional. The psalmist is going from the darkness of hurt towards the light of what will be becoming. And friends, that is what we are called to do each and every day as Christians. Now, some of us, frankly, a lot of us, are probably really lucky. We've had those moments in our life when we are in the depths and we are in the pain and we need our community to get through. But often, especially in the United States, we're pretty comfortable a lot of the time. Crisis will bring up pain in our lives, but most of us do not have to live in this darkness as a consistent reality. So what is our call then when we feel like we're already standing in the light? Well, friends, our call is the same one that Jesus had: to be present in the mourning of others, right? Sometimes we are not in the depths, but we at Manchester know that there are always others who are, and we have a responsibility to respond, right? We know that the students at Peabody Elementary School, the poorest performing school in St. Louis, are in the dark. And we know that offering educational opportunities can help lead them towards the light. We know through our Mozambique initiative that there are folks across the world who are thirsty, who are hungry, who are ill, and we have the ability to sit with their pain and help them to find the light. This is something as a church we've been doing for a long time. We have a reputation for being a great church for missions, right? But it's not enough to just do mission work because we do, or because it's our reputation. It's our job to do mission because we are a church that is in a time of transition, that is trying to find the light of becoming. We want to move past simple charity towards relationships of justice that allow us to see and respond to the hurt of others, even if it's not the same as ours. Because friends, our world is in darkness, and we are the ones who are called to bring the light. So my prayer for you this Lenten season is to not jump too quickly to the redemption. Don't gloss over the pain in order to get to the promise, because friends, if we are unwilling to sit in the pain, if we are unwilling to hear the holler of ourselves and our neighbors, we are going to miss the point, and we're going to miss God. Amen.